André Rieu has sold over 40 million albums. He has outsold AC/DC, Bruce Springsteen, and Coldplay at the box office. He turned classical music into the most successful touring phenomenon on earth.
At 76, the violinist who turned stadiums into ballrooms now faces his hardest overture yet. A sudden health scare in Mexico City forced him to stop mid-tour, and a quiet phone call revealed a fear he had never voiced. How did the maestro of joy reach this fragile moment? To understand, we rewind from a cold childhood to a halftime waltz seen by hundreds of millions, from therapy and rebellion to resilience through illness and loss. Along the way, one decision reshaped everything, trading relentless travel for guarded grace. And the next chapter may surprise you. The night he faltered. Mexico City should have been a victory lap. Another night where a violin turned a vast arena into a ballroom. Instead, at 76, André Rieu met the edge of his endurance. The city's altitude, the pace, and the pressure converged, and he was forced to call a halt. What began as a celebrated tour ended with a pause that echoed far beyond one venue. Backstage, according to those close to him, he was fevered, breathless, and disoriented after only his second performance. Leaning against a wall, he made a hushed call to Marjorie and said he never wanted a first concert day like that again. It was not a flourish or a dramatic line. It was a surrender to reality. Shortly after, the remaining dates were canceled. More than 40,000 fans would not see him play that month, an almost unthinkable outcome for an artist known for reliability. Across continents, audiences who had waltzed to his melodies felt a jolt of worry. The man who made joy look effortless had, for once, run out of steps. And with that silence came a question he could no longer avoid. What does it cost a musician to lug an entire orchestra, manage a full production, and meet the expectations of millions, year after year? Age alone doesn't tell the whole tale, but it does slice the margins. High altitudes and tight turnarounds test even the toughest performers. When the body finally says no, it does it cleanly. No bargaining, no delay. For decades, André pushed through illness and fatigue with a grin. This time, there wasn't any mask to hide behind, no curtain to raise. The message was straightforward. Even legends have limits. Even kings must rest. Venues, crews, and cities were standing by, but everything stopped with one decision. The pause traveled through his operation like a ripple, yet the deeper tremor lived inside him. To stop, he first had to accept something he had never truly permitted before. That acceptance would change more than a date on a calendar. The man known for turning stadiums into waltz halls had been brought down to stillness. The contrast felt sharp and a bit sobering too, and it created a mystery that figures and schedules can't resolve. How does someone who built an empire of celebration arrive at a moment this fragile? The answer starts far away from Mexico City. If you listen closely to the hush around that canceled tour, you can hear the earliest echoes in a childhood where music was strict and love was scarce. Wounds before applause. André Rieu was born in 1949 in Maastricht, into a devout Catholic family where discipline governed every room. His father, named André, was a renowned conductor revered on stage and feared at home. The house felt less like a refuge and more like a barracks. No hugs, no laughter, no warmth. Perfection was the only currency, and affection was not in circulation. His mother watched grades and technique with hawk-like focus, as if creativity itself were a flaw. When a teacher called him an artist, it was taken as an insult, not a compliment. Then, at 5, he met his first violin teacher, an 18-year-old whose playing carried a tenderness he had never encountered. He did not understand romance, but he recognized freedom, and he found it in sound. While other children labored over scales, he discovered vibrato because it felt like a voice he had been denied. The violin became a place where he was allowed to feel, not just perform. Only when I played did I feel seen, he would later admit. That sense of being seen would steer every choice he made. As a teenager in the 60s, his love for waltzes kind of collided with his father's strict, unforgiving ideals, all at once. "I didn't raise you to play waltzes," was the rebuke that tried to shrink his spirit and make it smaller than it already was. André wasn't really chasing novelty or whatever, he was chasing connection. The more he got pushed toward rigidity, the more he leaned toward joy. Like it was a compass he refused to lose. Around 1968, he brought Marjorie home, the woman he loved, and would later marry. His mother told her to leave, just like that. After that, André chose a different path, more quietly than anyone expected. He walked away and never looked back. His parents didn't attend a single performance, not once, not even when fame was filling arenas and spilling light everywhere. He spent years in therapy, not to collect status or any kind of trophy, but for survival. "My parents didn't love me," he said plainly, not with bitterness, more with this clear calm. Healing wasn't about deleting the past. It was about rebuilding a future that felt humane, even if it took time, even if it took years. He wanted to construct a world where music could breathe, and emotions were actually allowed to exist. And from that grief came a mission to give other people what he'd been denied. Joy wouldn't be trivial, not as some decoration or small talk. Joy would be essential. Connection wouldn't be some side effect that happens by accident. It would be the point, and he wouldn't apologize for making people smile, even when it annoyed the wrong kind of people. The man who paused in Mexico City did not become fragile overnight. The fault lines began in a quiet house decades ago. Building a new sound. By the late 1970s, André had done his time inside formal orchestras, even under his father's baton. The concert halls felt cold in familiar ways. Polite conversations about weather and wages, never about the music itself. That silence hurt more than the workload. He needed a space where feeling was not an error. In 1978, at 29, he formed the Maastricht Salon Orchestra. It was modest, mobile, and unfussy, playing community centers, weddings, and border towns. There was little money, but there was freedom. He could finally shape concerts around emotion, not etiquette. Behind that leap stood Marjorie, a teacher by training and a writer at heart. She booked dates, did the paperwork, and shouldered the risk so he could focus on sound. When arrangements were needed to keep the music alive, she quietly supplied them. She carried his fragile dream when others would have crushed it. By 1987, the small ensemble had reached its ceiling, and André dared a bigger bet. He founded the Johann Strauss Orchestra with about a dozen musicians and a simple goal: move hearts, not impress experts. A waltz orchestra in an age of pop stars sounded improbable. He did it anyway. Their first performance on January 1st, 1988, set the tone. Color replaced stiffness, and audiences laughed and clapped instead of sitting in awestruck silence. Critics rolled their eyes, but regular people felt welcome. It was a concert that behaved like a celebration. "I never wanted perfection. I wanted connection," he said, and he meant it. The group played folk melodies with grandeur, letting beauty feel communal rather than locked behind velvet ropes. Shows stretched beyond concert etiquette into shared delight. The idea began to catch fire, one hall at a time. Therapy, rebellion, and love had fused into a new kind of classical night. It did not reject tradition. It reframed it around feeling. Marjorie stayed in the background, tuning the engine while André steered the ride. Together, they proved that sincerity could be a strategy. What started in small rooms was about to step into places no one expected. But its heartbeat, joy as a serious craft, was already set. The Stadium Waltz breakthrough. In 1995, a football pitch in Vienna turned into an unlikely ballroom. During the UEFA Champions League final, André Rieu walked onto the grass with the Johann Strauss Orchestra and led Dmitri Shostakovich's Waltz No. 2 as the halftime show. The cameras panned, the crowd swayed, and a setting built for speed and rivalry softened into rhythm and smile. In minutes, classical music felt unbuttoned and alive. The broadcast sent that feeling far beyond the stadium. Tens of millions watched across Europe, then went looking for the waltz they had just felt in their living rooms. Record stores scrambled, radio programmers leaned in, and Rieu's recordings, led by his waltz repertoire, shot up national charts. What had been a quiet ascent became a rush of recognition. The surge did not stop at the Dutch border. Germany embraced him, and Australia went a step further, filling arenas and stadiums for shows that looked like grand open-air galas. There, his DVDs and albums stacked near the top of the charts at the same time, a rare feat for any classical artist. The message was simple: make beauty welcoming, and people will come. Not everyone cheered. Traditionalists dismissed the gowns, lighting, and easy laughter as showbiz, unworthy of serious music. Some critics bristled at the sing-alongs and smiles, as if joy were a flaw. But while debates filled columns, families filled seats, dancing in aisles and wiping away tears between pieces. Rieu answered the criticism without raising his voice. Sort of, and he really didn't make a big deal out of it. He said the solemn mood in many classical concerts keeps people away, and he set out to remove that, bit by bit. On his stage, etiquette never really outranked emotion, and perfection never eclipsed connection. I mean, that choice. It became his signature, you know. Then, in 2008, he doubled down on spectacle with conviction. Full speed. He built a full-scale touring replica of Vienna's Schönbrunn Palace. Fountains, chandeliers, and all, and took it around the world. Purists shook their heads, okay, but audiences gasped. Then cheered. For them it was opera house grandeur, delivered to the doorstep, not a lecture. Through it all, the core never changed, though. Rieu's concerts treated classical music like a living room, not a locked room where everything stays still. So a folk tune could sit beside a Strauss waltz, and both could belong there together. He invited applause between movements. He made eye contact, and there was laughter too. The barrier between stage and seats thinned noticeably. He was not asking listeners to pass some exam. He was asking them to feel something, properly. Behind the lights, Marjorie kept the machine steady from business calls to arrangements and logistics. Like all the boring but necessary parts, she guarded the finances, while he guarded the mood. And that partnership turned sincerity into a kind of strategy. What critics called kitsch, millions recognized as warmth they had been missing. And once that warmth found a global audience, it refused to leave. As the crowds grew and the stages got larger, so did the invisible cost of keeping everything in motion. Strain, loss, and resolve. By 2010, the rhythm that had carried André Rieu for decades finally missed a step. A viral infection attacked his inner ear, the delicate system that governs balance and orientation. For a violinist, it was devastating. The room could tilt without warning, and even walking straight was a challenge. He had to cancel a tour, a decision that cut against every instinct he had honed. That pause frightened him more than any bad review ever could. He spoke later of the fear that it might all be over, that the stage he loved might no longer be safe. Recovery took time, patience, and a willingness to slow down that did not come naturally. When he returned, it was with more caution and with a deeper respect for the ground beneath his feet. Then came a different kind of blow in 2016. During a UK tour, his longtime trombonist and close friend Ruud Merckx died suddenly, stunning the orchestra and everyone around it. Rieu cancelled the remaining shows and mourned with his musical family, speaking of Merckx not as a colleague, but as kin. The grief lingered in quiet ways long after the headlines faded. Even through illness and loss, he kept stepping back on stage. Sometimes he did it while fighting fatigue or fever, unwilling to disappoint fans who had waited months for a single night. He felt responsible for the players, the crew, and the promise printed on every ticket. But duty, repeated often enough, can drain a body that once ran on pure joy. The reckoning finally arrived in early 2024. At altitude in Mexico City, after pushing through a demanding start, his body said no, and the concerts were canceled. It was the kind of full stop that forces a new conversation, not just with managers and doctors, but with one's self. Endurance had met its limit in public view. In that stillness, the lesson grew clear. Pressing on was no longer the brave choice if it risked the music itself. Slowing down was not surrender, it was preservation. He had to decide how to keep playing without breaking. Grief and illness did not harden him, they softened his approach. In the years that followed, he spoke more often of gratitude from the stage and allowed moments of silence to land between songs. The smiles were gentler, the nods to the orchestra warmer, the bows a touch longer. He seemed to understand that every concert was both performance and thanksgiving. The resolve that remained was steadier than before. He would honor the friends he had lost, guard the health that had wavered, and keep faith with the audience that had carried him. The goal was no longer to conquer new territory, but to protect the ground that mattered. To do that, the work around him would need to change as much as the work within him. From collapse to care. After the 2024 health scare, the center of gravity around André Rieu shifted from momentum to protection. His son, Pierre, who had long managed production and logistics, tightened the schedule and trimmed long-haul flights. The focus turned to Europe, with fewer time zones and longer recovery windows between shows. What looked like a retreat was really a recalibration, built to keep the music alive without breaking the man who plays it. The change shows up in small, steady habits. Travel is simpler, rehearsals are planned with buffers, and medical advice is folded into the calendar rather than forced around it. Rieu speaks less about ambition and more about feeling well enough to feel the music. The stage remains grand, but the path to it is softer and safer. Nothing tested that resolve like 2020, when lockdowns silenced concert halls worldwide. Rieu's touring machine, usually booked years ahead, came to a full stop. He kept his people on the payroll, month after month, even as income plunged. It was loyalty made visible, the kind that holds a family together when the lights go out. At the height of that strain, he even considered parting with his prized Stradivarius to secure jobs and cash flow. Reports at the time described a potential sale, which he later stepped back from as his situation stabilized. In the years that followed, he confirmed he had kept the instrument he loves. For fans, its continued presence felt like a promise that the heart of his sound would endure. Home has been sort of his anchor through all of it. In Maastricht, his centuries-old castle works as headquarters too, and as a creative refuge that feels almost borrowed from some older, quieter time. There are scores spread across long tables and ideas tested in rooms that echo a little too much, until the best version of the thought lands. Marjorie, his wife, is the quiet architect off stage, shaping plans, words, and tone. Her steady judgment has kept the whole enterprise balanced between art and prudence, without fanfare, just by being consistent. With Pierre running operations and watching the pace, Rieu can arrive at a venue with fewer worries, chasing him all the way to the podium. The orchestra gets something similar out of this: a reliable rotation, the same backbone of musicians, the trust of decades together. What audiences feel as ease on stage is not really an accident. It's built by guardrails, by family, by people who have done the same work before. The aim isn't only to perform, but to last, in a way that doesn't burn out. That philosophy frames what comes next. Rieu's signature summer concerts on Maastricht's Vrijthof Square are planned again for 2025. And yes, it's a tradition that pulls fans in from all over the world, back to the spot where his legend started to grow. The setting is both intimate and vast at once, like a public square, that quietly becomes a shared ballroom. It's the right place for a season that's more about gratitude and care than spectacle. And the result is a legacy shaped less by scale than by spirit. He still jokes about playing at 140, though the smile now carries a quiet acceptance of limits. Each program leans into warmth, memory, and that kind of joy which doesn't need to be loud to be true. The maestro who once chased everywhere has learned, finally, how to choose where and why. From a collapse in Mexico City to a gentler, Europe-focused rhythm, André Rieu has traded speed for staying power. Loyalty to his people, a safe home base, and family at the helm now guide the music. If this moved you, like the video, subscribe and follow the music into the next story waiting for you on the screen.